Hello, good morning and good afternoon from Ankara and Japan for our event. I'd like to say welcome to all of you on behalf of TOBB Economics and Technology University, Departments of Political Science and International Relations. As some of you might be aware, we have been running many cooperative projects with Japan and Japan government and with our department. There are some activities we have already executed. In addition to all of them, we have been also teaching at our department in our curriculum, Southeast Asia and some politics for the Southeast Asia. We care about that issue that is highly connected to our understanding. Is highly connected for IR scholars who want to be let's say challenging in the future. So the title of today's event, International Symposium, is Maritime Security, Comparative Perspectives from Turkey and Japan. I'd like to say welcome to all of you. And just a couple of words I'd like to echo for the project team. So our department fellow, Associate Professor Bahadır Pehlivan Türk, who was graduated from Japan, Kyoto University. He holds his PhD degree and he's perfect speaking and writing in Japanese. Is our leading academic at our department. So I like to express my special thanks to Bahadır Pehlivan Türk. Thank you very much. And also we have Şaban Kardeş. For the time being, he's not here. He's the manager of coordinator of this project. Last week, on Friday, the same day, we had a Global Health Diplomacy Symposium. Actually, I have lots of, I've gained lots of benefits from that symposium. I do believe this symposium on maritime security could be great for all of us, fruitful. So Turkey is a peninsula and Japan is an island country. And although there are thousands of miles between these two countries, there are lots of similarities. When I went to Japan and came back to Japan, I thought Japan's Turks are so similar each other in terms of political issues. That's my expertise. So I do believe, again, for the maritime issues, not only for militarily, but also for shipping and transportation, there are many similarities as well, and benchmarking is really plausible for these two countries. So let me just pass the floor after echoing these words and the intention of our understanding. And also I want to announce that in the first half of this year, with our panelists and also one missing here, Dimitri from Greece, are going to get together and prepare a book, an edited book, which will last our studies, hopefully forever. So let me begin with our keynote speakers based on our program. First keynote speaker is Mr. Ünal BAYLAN. He was graduated from Marine Transportation and Management Engineering, Kadir Technical University, and he has worked as a Marine Transportation Management Engineer for several years. So, which means he has field experience or blue waters experience. Actually, personally, as an amateur person, I have some sailing experience as well. He served as the head of the Maritime Freight Transport Department at the Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure for a period of time, and he was appointed to the Directorate-General for Maritime Affairs on 15 June 2020. Mr. Ünal BAYLAN, I would like to express my appreciation for allocating your time to us. Floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Good morning, Turkish academics, and good afternoon to Japanese guests for time differences. The representative of Japan National Defense Academy, Professor Kamiya, distinguished representatives of Japanese and Turkish academia, dear guests and participants. I express my pleasure for participating to Maritime Security Comparative Perspectives from Turkey and Japan International Symposium as a General Director of Turkey Maritime Authority. I wish a beneficial and strengthening symposium for both countries and for the bilateral relations between Japan and Turkey. As known, both countries have excessive experience on implementing the international maritime related conventions and on dealing maritime challenges in their regions and worldwide. Our countries have also noteworthy bilateral and international experience for the cooperation on maritime sector. Therefore, I believe that this symposium is the perfect avenue for exchanging views from experts from both countries and for reaching the best practices. I intend to give a brief talk about the activities of our authority within the context of today's activity, mainly themed on maritime security. Ministry of Transport and Infrastructure is the designated body of Turkey in accordance with the International Ship and Port Facility Security Code in IMO, International Maritime Organization, which was put into force by the IMO in 2004. In the course, my Directorate-General defines the procedure and best for the implementation of the code and the national regulations, authorizes and inspects the relevant practitioners and establishes coordination and cooperation between the related government and private bodies. There are 365 Turkish flagged vessels sailing internationally within the certificates issued in accordance with the convention and the code by our authority. There are 183 port facilities in Turkey, which are compliant with the mentioned code, serving the merchant vessels. Port facilities in Turkey are placed in the most secure category by implementing the security level 1. Besides, Turkish main search and rescue coordination center authorized to receive security signals and notifications from Turkish flagged vessels, irrespective of their location and any other related persons in the Turkish Straits and Turkish Search and Rescue Region, is in operation under my Directorate-General for the assistance and coordinations on the basis of 7 days, 24 hours. In order to monitor and control the related sea areas, marine surveillance system such as vessel tracking system, automatic identification system, long-range identification and tracking system were initially established in 2003 for the Turkish Straits. Later on, similar systems were established for Izmir, Kocaeli and Mersin districts where there is dense maritime traffic in busy ports. All mentioned completed systems and newly planned systems have been projected, established and maintained by my Directorate-General. I would like to point out with pleasure that we'll add new systems to those above for the Marmara Sea and Eastern Mediterranean by using national software hardware. Our ministry and my Directorate-General implement and will continue to implement the jurisdiction and mission sourced from the law on the above briefly explained issues. Dear participants, as it's known, each state, its peculiar policy and strategy on the maritime security in the order to protect its own benefits and resources. Turkey, as a significant state in the region and the world, also has the policy and strategy by which protects the national benefits while considering the principle of equity. Today, I would like to underline that Turkey will protect its right on the Blue Homeland Doctrine, though I will not touch upon this subject today. Instead, I would like to bring some emerging issues recently getting significance globally on maritime security to the agenda of this symposium. Starting from the most recent one, the blockage of Suez Canal negatively impacted the production activities, supply chain, and maritime logistics. Consequently, the economic, social, and political security in short term. Being aware the shifting of production and consumption centers due to natural and artificial barriers in 21st century, I believe that the effects on this very recent incident will spread over the future periods. Reshaped piracy counties in the 21st century, new instances have been often reported from another region. While the Gulf of Aden was the center of those kinds of illegal activities almost 10 years ago, a merchant vessel was attacked in the Gulf of Guinea very short time ago. One Azerbaijan seafarer was killed and 15 Turkish seafarers were kidnapped for ransom. Fortunately, seafarers were released in a short time by initiative of our state, and they reached to their homes and families. The opposed piracy should be given to measures to be taken in the works and studies on the maritime security in order not to rehappen similar illegal activities. I would like to underline that Turkey will take initiatives at the International Maritime Organization in order to ensure that measures similar to those taken against piracy in the Gulf of Aden are taken by the international community in Gulf of Guinea. Any event occur in any place in the world affects directly or indirectly another place due to globalization. This situation has a significant consequence to maritime security. COVID is the simplest example. The COVID has not remained just only a health issue, but the COVID also affected connectivity of countries, created new trends, impacting maritime transport and also security. The empty container crisis which we are witnessing recently is an example of its indirect consequences. Seafarers have remained on board for an usually long duration due to the COVID. The normalizations of the disembarkation and reach the home of psychological and physiological affected seafarers subjects one another important maritime security problem. As you know, seafarers are declared as key employee by our Directorate-General. Any event occurring in the global trade has different impacts on the countries depending on their development status. Those impacts also reshape the supply chain between the raw material and the final product. Bearing in mind that 85% of world trade is transported by seaways, the security of the new trans and new maritime routes gains significant importance. The developments on the supply of the shipping fleet have continued. The dimension of the ships become like islands. While economies of scale is improved, on the other hand, dimension of the ports and the canals have been increased. As we witnessed by the most recent blockage in the Suez Canal, those kinds of improvements have direct impact on the maritime security. Terminal equipment and yards surveying to those ships have been mandatorily enlarged. When those vessels arrive to the port, there becomes bottlenecks and temporary density on the equipment, yard, intermodal connection, and supply of human resources. Security of all those operations must be tackled with the maritime security concept. On the other hand, consumer behavior has been changed. Door logistics and the time spent for transport have gained significant importance. 3D printing technologies have commonly spread. The distribution network of e-commerce companies has been redesigned. Companies which invested on the digital technologies have positioned one step ahead of the others. Likewise, the maritime sector has been using the electronic platforms in both the land and the sea legs. Advanced analytics, Internet of Things, and artificial intelligence have been used effectively. A navigation concept has been developed by integrating the individual navigation equipment. Autonomous vessels and terminal cranes have been surveying to this sector nowadays. While the shipping community has gained excessive benefits from the mentioned developments, proportionally, concerns on the cybersecurity subject have been rising. Therefore, utmost priority should also to be given to cybersecurity in the maritime security agendas. Apart from those mentioned before, the sustainable and secure usage and management of the resources constitutes a security issue alone. Due to direct and indirect effect of global warming and harmful emissions from ships, those issues should also be addressed within the maritime security agenda. Lastly, the economic, social, and political inequalities in the world cause significant troubles such as terrorism and illegal immigration and noteworthy ratio of those cautious at sea. These would be my last input to maritime security agenda of today. In this context, I repeat my wishes on the continuation of bilateral and international cooperation between friendly country Japan and our country, particularly on the maritime security concept. I would like to thank to valuable staff of TOBB University, all contributing academicians and Japanese colleagues. I will be following the outcomes of the symposium. I pass my greetings and I wish you all the convenience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ünal Baylan, or in Japanese word, Ünal-san. Thank you very much for your speech entitled Maritime Security Agenda of Turkey. Now we are moving to our second keynote speaker. And I just want to remind our audiences, you can ask your questions through the Q&A window, which may let you to ask your questions or comments. We are open to them and to share at the end of second keynote speaker. Professor Matake Kamiya is currently Professor of International Relations at the National Defense Academy of Japan. He was graduate of the University of Tokyo School of Liberal Arts and Columbia University Graduate School of Arts and Sciences as a Fulbright grantee. He is also editor-in-chief of Discuss Japan, Japan Foreign Policy Forum, visiting superior research fellow at the Japan Forum on International Relations, and a member of the board of directors of the Japan Association of International Security. These are some issues that I can raise about Professor Matake Kamiya. Thank you, Professor Matake Kamiya, for being with us. Now, the title of your speech is the meaning of maritime security for Japan. We are ready to listen to you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for a very kind introduction, Professor Doctor. Am I pronouncing your name properly? Haldun Yalçınkaya?
Actually, you can pronounce my name better than my mother. Okay.
Thank you very much. But anyway, before I start my remark, I'd like to express my deepest gratitude to the TOBB University of Economics and Technology for giving me a chance to speak in this important gathering of Turkish and Japanese scholars mainly. Thank you very much. And before I start my remark, I have to say one more thing. That is what Professor of International Relations at the National Defense Academy is in Japan. In most of the countries in the world, including I think Turkey, this kind of academic institution, National Defense Academy or things like that, are populated mainly by or heavily by uniformed people. But in Japan, it's not the case. Since the end of the World War II, Japanese defense academies are mostly populated by civilian scholars. And that's the idea of former Prime Minister Yoshida Shigeru, who was a Prime Minister just after Japan lost the World War II, who believed that the mistake Japan made during the World War II was kind of caused by separation of civilian society and military institution. And therefore, he believed that the future Japanese military officers should receive, regular university education as well as military education, of course. So that's why he created an institution populated with, civilian scholars, and that tradition still continues. And therefore, society perceived me as a kind of outside of the government scholar, happened to be paid by the government, teaching at this kind of institution. And that's why I have almost 99.9% of 99.90% of freedom of speech. Probably I shouldn't say that Japan should go nuclear tomorrow, but except for those crazy things, I can say anything. But that at the same time means that what I'm going to say today will not represent anything. Japanese government, Japan's defense ministry, or Japanese Defense Academy, or whatsoever. It's my personal opinion. I hope that my opinion influenced my government, but it's not my decision. But anyway, thank you very much. So today I'm going to talk about, Today I'm going to talk about, what maritime security means for Japan. In Japan, maritime security has been considered as the key, indispensable element of national security. Why? The answer is very simple. Japan is, as you know, an island country surrounded by the seas. Japan's security and prosperity is heavily dependent on peace and stability of the sea. Japan's current national security strategy defines Japan as a maritime nation. The national program's guideline adopted in 2018 maintains that fundamental to Japan's peace and prosperity is, quote, to ensure the safety of maritime and air traffic by safeguarding the order of open and stable oceans, unquote, which is, quote, an order based on fundamental norms such as rule of law and freedom of navigation, unquote. Of course, the maintenance of security in the adjacent seas is insignificant for Japan. For example, in recent years, as I will explain later, Japan has faced increasing provocation by China around the Senkaku Islands, which is an inherent territory of Japan, located at the East China Sea. Defense against such threats from seas represent an extremely important issue for Japan's security. It is, however, not the case that the security in the adjacent waters is the only source of concern for Japan's maritime security. For Japan, security and stability of the oceans all over the world is vitally important. Why is that so? That is because the prosperity of Japan is heavily dependent on the security and stability of sea lanes of communication. Japan is an island country with limited natural resources. Japan depends on imports from abroad for demands for a variety of indispensable natural resources, including energy supplies such as crude oil. And most of such imports rely on maritime transportation on a trade volume basis. That means in terms of tons. For Japan's prosperity, exports of industrial and other products made in Japan are also crucial. And such exports are also rely on maritime transportations. For example, Japan imports most of its fossil fuels. Ratios of dependence on imports in 2018 were 99.7% for oil and 97.5% for liquefied natural gas. Also, people in Japan cannot survive without food imports. Japan's calorie-based food sufficiency rate is in fiscal 2019 was only 38%. These facts clearly demonstrate how crucial the security and stability of oceans all over the world are for the security and prosperity of Japan. And particularly important for Japan is to ensure the security of the sea lanes of communication that pass through the Pacific Ocean and Indian Ocean. Much of Japan's imports and exports are transported through these sea areas. For example, almost 90% of Japan's oil imports are from the Middle East, and they have to be transported to Japan through the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. Maritime security in this sea area is therefore critically important for Japan's survival. Japan's efforts to sustain maritime security in this sea area includes anti-piracy activities. Among the Japanese people, due mainly to the lingering influence of World War II, a strong reluctance to the employment of military force as a tool of statecraft is still widely shared. The Japanese people are particularly cautious about allowing their government to dispatch the self-defense force to overseas, except for the cases of participation in the United Nations peace operations. However, in 2009, when the Japanese government made up its mind to dispatch maritime self-defense force ships to off the coast of Somalia in the Gulf of Aden to engage in anti-piracy operations, nearly 2/3 of the Japanese people immediately supported the decision. And in July 2011, Japan established its military base in Djibouti for the self-defense force troops deployed in that mission. It was the first military base that Japan had constructed outside of Japan since the end of World War II. However, the measure had multi-partisan support from most of the political parties and was widely supported by the public. These facts clearly demonstrate that the recognition is widely shared among the Japanese public that in order to protect the safety and stability of the sea lanes of communication that is vital for Japan, Japan needs to do everything it can do, including employment of the self-defense force. As I said, the most important sea lanes of communication for Japan passed through the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. To this sea area, which is now called the Indo-Pacific region, maritime advancement of China has become increasingly salient in recent years. China's maritime advancement is problematic and has raised the concerns of other countries because it involves attempts to change the status quo by physical force and coercion. In many occasions, particularly in the East China Sea and South China Sea, China has shown strong tendency to pursue the promotion of its national interest by its physical power, often disregarding the widely accepted international rules. Throughout the post-World War II years, peace and prosperity of the world has been built and maintained based on the liberal rules-based international order, so-called, in which all countries, whether large or small, are expected to abide by internationally agreed rules. Large country, small countries, all are expected to abide by what is considered to be just and fair. However, China increasingly attempts to change the status quo by force and coercion to promote its national interest. That represents a serious challenge to this rules-based international order. Upholding this international order, rules-based international order, in the face of an intensifying challenge from China, now represents one of the top priority foreign policy goals for Japan. Japan particularly worries about China's intensifying attempts to challenge the maritime order in the East and South China Sea. In East China Sea, China has strengthened an unfounded territorial claim for Japan's Senkaku Islands and has repeatedly taken provocative action around the islands. For example, in 2019 alone, a total of 126 Chinese government ships intruded into Japanese territorial water around the Senkakus, 126. And in 2020, the number still stood at 88. Also, in the contiguous zone just off the islands, Chinese government ships operated for 333 days in 2020, last year alone. The number was record high. In February 2021, China's new Coast Guard law went into effect. The law has upgraded China's Coast Guard to quasi-military status, allowing it to fire at foreign ships in the waters claimed by China. Many countries in the international community, including Vietnam, the Philippines, the United States, and Japan, have expressed concern over this new Chinese law because it aims to legitimize actions not permitted under the international law. But Japan's concern is particularly grave because Japan worries about the possibility of use of force by Chinese Coast Guard ships in Japan's territorial water or in the contiguous zone of the Senkaku Islands, based on the unfounded claim that the islands belongs to China. Due mainly to such behavior by China, the Japanese sentiment toward China has been extremely negative in recent years. In the public opinion surveys on diplomacy conducted annually by the Cabinet Office of Japan, around 80% of respondents have consistently answered that they do not feel affinity toward China. China's attempt to change the status quo by physical force has also become increasingly blatant in the South China Sea. China has drawn a U-shaped line called the 9-dash line on the map of the South China Sea and has claims waters within that line. Actually, the 9-dash line encircles as much as 90% of the South China Sea. The line runs as far as 2,000 kilometers from the Chinese mainland to within a few hundred kilometers of the Philippines, Malaysia, and Vietnam. China claims that it owns all islands and features that are located within the line, including the Spratly Islands and the Paracel Islands. China's unilateral claim has raised frictions with its Southeast Asian neighbors. However, in recent years, China has even built 7 artificial islands in the Spratlys by reclaiming reefs. China insists that it has historic rights, that's what they say, historic rights to own the most of the South China Sea. But on July 12, 2016, the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague, Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague, ruled that China has no legal basis to claim historic rights to the South China Sea. However, China's Vice Foreign Minister called the ruling, quote, "It is just a piece of waste paper." It is just a piece of waste paper, unquote. So ignoring the ruling, China continued the reclamation of the artificial islands. Initially, China maintained that the reclamations were only for peaceful purposes. However, in recent years, China's top-ranking officials do not hide that the purpose of construction man-made islands include, quote, to meet the necessary defense needs of China, unquote. In fact, China has constructed a variety of facilities on the artificial islands for military purposes, including airstrips, helipads, port facilities, missile systems, and radars. Besides, in the Paracel Islands in the northern South China Sea, China has deployed surface-to-air missile systems and anti-ship cruise missiles. In August last year, China launched 4 ballistic missiles during military exercise around the Paracel Islands. The South China Sea is a sea area where vital sea lanes of communication for many East Asian countries, including Japan, but not only Japan, pass through. For example, 90% of East Asian energy imports pass through the South China Sea. The importance of the South China Sea is not limited to East Asian countries, because about 1/3 of the global maritime commerce passed through this area. The fact that China has been rapidly strengthening its military presence in that important sea area, often disregarding the international laws and rules, and even the ruling by the International Court, represents a serious challenge for peace and prosperity in East Asia and even globally. Since the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, China's attempts to change the status quo in the East and South China Sea have been considerably intensified rather than being halted. As I mentioned before, the number of Chinese government ships that sailed in the contiguous zone just off the Senkaku Islands hit record high in last year. From 2020 to 2021, there were repeated incidents in which China Coast Guard ships intruded into Japan's territorial waters around the Senkakus and approached and chased Japanese fishing boats. When the Japanese government protested against that move, the Chinese government blatantly asserted that China Coast Guard ships simply took care of Japanese fishing boats illegally operating in the territorial water of China. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi, during his visit to Tokyo in November last year, said that China would safeguard China's sovereignty over the islands. I'd like the Turkish friends to imagine what it would mean for Turkey if some foreign country made such a claim to Turkey's legitimate territory. In the South China Sea, China's one-sided declaration in 2012 of the establishment of the so-called Sansha City, which covers all the South China Sea area claimed by China, invited harsh criticism and resentment from many countries in East Asia and beyond. In April last year, China declared the establishment of 2 new districts, Sansha and Kisha, under the Nansha and Kisha under the Sansha City, an obvious attempt to strengthening of the effective control of the South China Sea at the very time when the world was suffering from the pandemic originated from that country. I'd like to emphasize to the Turkish friends that behind the background of Japan's recent efforts to promote the free and open Indo-Pacific vision, there are such facts and developments. According to Japan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Japan's free and open Indo-Pacific vision, quote, aims to promote peace, stability, and prosperity across the Indo-Pacific region by achieving a free and open maritime order based on the basic principles of the rules of law, freedom of navigation and overflight, peaceful settlement of disputes, and promotion of free trade, unquote. For Japan's security and prosperity, the maintenance of stability of critical sea lanes of communication is the must. For that purpose, ensuring rules-based international order and freedom of navigation in the vast sea area connecting the Pacific Ocean and the Indian Ocean is the must. And in order to achieve that, addressing the challenges posed by China's maritime advancement and other things, including piracy, is the must. So while Japan's desire to cooperate with a country with the second largest national power in the world, Japan needs to counter the challenges, especially maritime challenges posed by that country. In recent years, concerns about the challenges that China poses to the maritime security in the Pacific has become widely shared among many countries other than Japan. Japan's free and open Indo-Pacific vision has given significant influence on the United States. The United States has adopted the regional strategy of the same name, Free and Open Indo-Pacific Strategy. Free and Open Indo-Pacific is also basically accepted by Australia and India. ASEAN countries, while maintaining their traditional attitude of trying to avoid being involved in major power rivalries, have shown sympathy toward Japan's assertion about the necessity to maintain the rules-based maritime order in the Indo-Pacific. For example, in the 2+2 meeting between the Japanese foreign and defense ministers and the Indonesian counterparts held just 3 days ago in Tokyo, the two sides expressed their shared concern over unilateral attempts to change the maritime status quo. Obviously, that implicates China. Japan, together with the United States, India, and Australia, has tried to activate the so-called Quad cooperation among the 4 countries in order to realize free and open Indo-Pacific. In the Quad foreign ministers meeting held in Tokyo in October last year, the 4 ministers agreed to regularize the meeting. And last month, the first Quad summit meeting was held online. Increasing number of the countries, even outside of the Indo-Pacific region, have expressed their interest in FOIP and Quad. Especially France, the UK, and Germany, those 3 countries have been formulating their respective Indo-Pacific policies and strategies. Among these countries, the recognition that China's rise is increasingly challenging their interests in the region is shared. And maritime security is considered a core interest in developing their Indo-Pacific approaches. These countries have been enhancing the activities of their naval ships in the Indo-Pacific. And in the case of UK, the government has made formal requests to join the CPTPP. Meanwhile, the Quad members have come to share the understanding that in order to realize free and open Indo-Pacific, it is necessary to broaden cooperation with other countries. At the first Quad summit meeting that was held only half a month ago, the leaders of the 4 countries shared that recognition. So now the expansion of the Quad framework, or the so-called Quad Plus, is becoming increasingly talked about. Finally, I very briefly touch upon Turkey. For Japan, if Turkey enhances maritime security cooperation with Japan, based on the understanding of the meaning of maritime security for Japan, as I explained in this short remark, it is very desirable because Japanese people knows that the 2 countries has a long history of friendship, starting from more than 100 years ago. As a security expert of Japan, I hope that Turkey will be interested in Japan's free and open Indo-Pacific vision and will consider some kind of cooperation with Japan and also a Quad and also a Quad Plus members. Maybe not as a member, but some kind of cooperation. I stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Matake Kamiya. Actually, there are many, let's say, common points with Japan and Turkey. A couple of weeks ago, from Japan Embassy in Ankara, they released a video footage from a research based on, let's say, First World War, prisoner of wars from Turkey, from Ottomans in Siberia. They flew away from Siberia and ended up in Japan. So Japanese government during these years organized a ship and repatriate them to our country. So there are many stories that we are not aware of, and lots of common sharing issues, historical issues. There are some questions for our keynote speakers. First question comes to, I guess, to Ünal BAYLAN, and there is a number for the questioner. I want to ask about energy policy in maritime transportation and reducing impacts of climate change. Would you mind making some comments on it, Mr. Ünal BAYLAN?
Thank you very much. Turkey fully supported international maritime mobilization strategies on emission control. Initial strategy identifies level of ambitions for the international shipping sector. And I think that technological innovation and the global introduction of alternative fuels and or energy sources for international shipping will be integral to achieve the overall ambitions. Level of ambitions directing the initial strategy are carbon intensity of the ship to decline through implementation of further phases of the energy efficiency design index for new ships. Carbon intensity of international shipping to decline to reduce carbon dioxide emissions per transport work and average cross international shipping last 40% to 2030 and pushing effort towards 70% 2058, etc. Global greenhouse emission from international shipping to peak and decline to peak emissions from international shipping as soon as possible and reduce the total annual greenhouse emissions last 50% in near future compared to 2010. In order to keeping the targets, we will give economic intensity to our shipbuilding industry for build green ship with alternative fuels. Thank you very much.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I think it's going to be more and more important by and large through the period. So we will see. And Professor Matake Kamiya, I think the other three questions are, most of them are for you. Have you read them or should I read it again for you?
I'm reading.
Yeah, and also let me explain. From Semra Yaren Çatak, she says, after the incident in Suez Canal stuck, the debates and different opinions about the alternative route. Is there any discussion you know about this issue in Japan? Or
no, I don't think that there are discussions about finding an alternate route.
Yeah, okay.
To transport materials which usually go through canal, Suez Canal to somewhere else. It is actually very difficult to find the alternative. That's the problem.
Yeah. The Northern Stream, I think she means to the Arctic region, I guess. That's what I understood. Yeah. Anyway.
Nord Stream can be a potential alternative, but we have to wait for technological development still.
Yeah, I see.
And also that's the sea area where the influence of Russia is very strong, and that poses some kind of challenge for us.
Yeah, okay. And the other questions, according to China's attempts at South and East Asia, SC, what is Japan's reaction in terms of military expenditure and international cooperation? The first one, I think you touch upon. Could you please compare RCEP and CPTPP in terms of maritime security? What will Japan do to secure trade lines?
Okay, to Japan's reaction to China's attempt at the South and East China Sea. It is necessary to separate Japan's reaction to the events in the East China Sea and the events in the South China Sea. events in the South China Sea, development in the South China Sea, that's a direct challenge to Japan's territorial sovereignty. And therefore, Japan can take, directly tough stance towards China. But still, because of reluctance of the Japanese public to take, to employ military forces to take care of its, foreign policy security troubles. Japanese reactions are, I think, softer than in the case of many other countries if they were put in a similar situation. In case of South China Sea, it is actually not very close to Japan. Although, as I explained, the very important sea lanes of communication for Japan pass through. So under the current constitution of Japan, that restricts Japan's, military activity outside of Japan's territory and territorial water quite severely. It is not easy for Japan to find a way to directly be involved in military activities of, for example, United States or Quad members and so on and so forth. More important Japanese reaction, and which has been already done to a considerable extent, is I think will be covered by Professor Furuya. That's capacity building.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, there's a widespread understanding, recognition that, it is necessary for a country like Japan, United States, Australia to support the capacity building of Southeast Asian countries to counter, so that they can counter effectively to the challenges posed by China or anybody else. And Japan has been doing whatever it can do within the restrictions imposed by the constitution to enhance the capacity building, to help the capacity building efforts of those countries. And that will be, I think, explained by Professor Furuya later.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
RCEP and CPTPP, I'm not very sure. But in RCEP, China is there. In CPTPP, because of its nature, although China expressed interest in joining CPTPP, and I think that's good, it is actually not easy for that country to join the CPP because, the criteria for the country which is allowed to CPTPP is not quite high in terms of free trade and so on, opening up of its markets and so on and so forth. So I think CPTPP will remain a forum without China, at least for the time being. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Professor, there is one more question from the chat board. Let me pass that question. By the way, I like to thank our audiences for listening us, not only from Japan and Turkey, but also, as far as I see, from Greece and from Moldova and from Italy. From Italy, from all around the world. I thank all of you. And this question comes from Italy. Sait Irkökücü says, as you know, maritime security challenges are an issue which cannot be covered by one nation. Specifically for your unique geography, he says, is there any initiative or cooperation on military domain like NATO for your region, which is open to regional countries? Any alliances system, he says.
As I said, Japan's free and open in the Pacific, and efforts to activate Quad, they are the main part of Japan's efforts to take initiative to form a kind of framework of international cooperation to face to the challenges which are intensifying in the area. But military initiative, that is somewhat difficult for Japan to take because of the constitutional regulation restriction. As I said, Japan for itself is, limited by constitution when it talks about utilizing military force outside of its territory and territorial area. So military cooperation with other countries is still quite a touchy effort. But I have to add that if it had been 10 years ago, for example, ongoing discussions about Quad, that's, I think, almost was unthinkable. Now it's possible because of the somewhat changing mind of Japanese people with regard to the employment of military tools for national defense and wider security tools. But finally, one more word. Today, my presentation focused mainly on the security military side of the discussion, maritime security. But of course, Japan's maritime security includes non-military aspects. And if you read the Ministry of Foreign Affairs documents on Japan's free and open Indo-Pacific, it actually includes a lot of non-military proposals and initiatives. So please pay attention to that.
Yeah, thank you. And the essence of these efforts we have been doing academically to reach secure seas, not insecure ones. So in order to increase the security in seas all around the world, I think it is better to discuss these issues to reach the peaceful environment. I like to thank Mr. Ünal BAYLAN and Professor Matake Kamiya for their great contributions as keynote speakers. So I think we are on time, and then we can move to our panel, I guess. Thank you very much, Matake Kamiya and Mr. Ünal BAYLAN. If you have time, you can stay. Otherwise, I'd like to thank to you. It is still open. It is still, it's going to be accessible through the YouTube later. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I will stay.
And now we can proceed our panel, which will be moderated by Dirk Siebels, Dr. Dirk Siebels, based in Denmark. Let me first introduce Dirk Siebels, and then I will pass the floor to you, Dirk. Dirk Siebels is member of our research team. Thank you very much for being us for the panel. He is a senior analyst at Risk Intelligence, a Denmark-based security intelligence company, where he is responsible for analysis on countries in sub-Saharan Africa. He holds a PhD from the University of Greenwich in London. His research concentrates on maritime security issues in sub-Saharan Africa, including the role of ports on maritime trade, offshore energy production, and the evolution of private maritime security providers. Dirk has contributed to a number of research projects, and he also holds a book. He published a book including many aspects of his research. Thank you for being with us. Now I am passing the floor to you to moderate the panel. And thank you all panelists for their possible great contributions to our symposium. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much to Professor Yalçınkaya for this very kind introduction. And also thank you very much to everybody attending today. And I hope you are taking away a lot of very important issues. So Professor Yalçınkaya has not only introduced our two very good keynote speakers at the beginning, but he has also done a lot of work in the background to actually bring this research group together and to make sure that there will be some very interesting outputs, which will be published in the coming months. I think there are many academics who complain about the writing part and how much time it takes, and I'm no exception to that. But the actual administration in the background is often even worse. So I think everybody presenting here today really appreciates these efforts simply to make this whole project run. So the background work is extremely important. And with that said, we have already heard some very interesting thoughts in the keynote presentations, and now we have 4 more speakers concentrating on very specific aspects related to maritime security. I am mostly here to make sure that everybody keeps to the schedule of about 15 minutes per presentation, and to organize our Q&A session at the end. I will take it for granted that everybody is familiar with online seminars by now, so please just send us your questions as you've done already, so that has worked. And we will try to include as many questions as possible, of course. And otherwise, I think we may be able to get back to you individually if we can't answer anything on time. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker. Tetsuo Kotani is Professor of Global Studies at Meikai University in Japan, and he is also a Senior Fellow at the Japan Institute of International Affairs. His research focuses on Japan's foreign and security policy, on the US-Japan alliance, and, important for us today, on maritime security in the Indo-Pacific region. So I'm very much looking forward to his take on maritime security implications of the quadrilateral cooperation between Japan, the United States, Australia, and India, which was already mentioned very briefly in one of the keynote addresses. So Professor Kotani, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. And also I'd like to thank the organizer for the invitation. So my my topic is the Quad and its implication for the maritime security, particularly cooperation between Japan and Turkey. So let me begin with the description of what Quad really means, and then I will develop my argument about the possible cooperation between Japan and Turkey and the other regional countries. So the quadrilateral cooperation among Japan, US, Australia, and India has its origin in a massive disaster relief operation after the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, which killed many people in Southeast Asia. And at that time, the 4 countries on an ad hoc base provided search and rescue and the disaster relief operation for the devastated regions. And following that, the 4 countries launched a strategic dialogue among senior diplomats to discuss the regional issues. But this original Quad didn't last long. We just had one senior level meeting, but we didn't have a follow-up for this. The reason was the 4 countries were not ready to pursue this Quad as a strategic dialogue. The United States at that time was still preoccupied with the Middle Eastern problems. And in Japan, there was a change of the leadership. And Prime Minister Abe, he tried to push this quadrilateral mechanism, but his successors were not so much interested. And also Australia at that time was too much heavily dependent on Chinese economy. So Canberra didn't want China get angry. And India maintains the non-alignment tradition, and India was not so much interested in pursuing the quadrilateral meeting. So the original Quad didn't last long. But in 2017, the 4 countries agreed to resume the Quad strategic dialogue. And following that, we basically have twice meetings every year. And as Professor Kamiya mentioned, we had 40 ministers meetings in 2019 and 2020. And this year, we also had a third foreign minister meetings, and followed by the first online summit meeting among the four countries. So why the Quad version 2 is gaining certain momentum? I think the number one reason is because the four countries share concern about China's unilateral actions in the maritime domain, and also Chinese military provocations in the region, and also economic coercion vis-a-vis China's neighboring countries. And the four countries now share the vision of free and open in the Pacific. And the Japanese government under Prime Minister Abe, they pushed this quadrilateral mechanism very hard. And the United States under President Trump welcomed the burden sharing among the allies and partners. And Australia became more realistic about the challenges posed by China, particularly China's intervention into the Australian domestic politics became a big concern for Australians. And Australia, although Australia is still dependent on the Chinese in terms of economy, but they are taking tougher stance on Chinese challenges. And India, of course, still maintains non-alignment tradition, but for example, last year, the border dispute between China and India became very intensive. So India is also becoming more realistic. And another reason why India became more positive on Quad is because of the China's Belt and Road Initiative and China's growing influence in the region and in China's economic partnership with Pakistan. So four countries share the same concern in the region, and this is the primary reason why the Quad version 2 is gaining momentum. And in the summit meeting just last month, we agreed to set up 3 working groups, one on the vaccination for COVID-19, and the second working group is on the climate change, how the 4 countries can cooperate on this issue. And the last working group is on the high technology and supply chain to reduce the Chinese influence throughout the region. And in the joint statement among the 4 leaders, there was no reference to China, but on the mind of the 4 leaders, there was China. So China was on our mind, but not on our lips. But definitely, China is the primary concern for the Quad mechanism. And in the same joint statement, the maritime security was referred to as an important area for cooperation. And last year, the Quad members conducted first quadrilateral naval exercise. Japan, United States, and India have conducted trilateral naval exercises for several years. But last year, Australia finally joined this naval exercise. And in January this year, the 4 countries conducted a anti-submarine operation training with Canada in the waters near Guam. And in April this month, the 4 countries are planning to conduct another naval exercise, this time with French Navy. So not only among the Quad members, but a Quad plus mechanism is already ongoing in terms of maritime security. Of course, there's a challenge to promote this Quad cooperation, particularly on security issues. But the 4 countries are now try to overcome their differences. And one big concern among the 4 is the human rights issue. Although the 4 countries try to uphold the human rights protection, but particularly in the United States, there's a growing concern about the human rights violation in India. So this issue may become a certain negative element in the Quad cooperation, but I hope the 4 countries can come up with a good resolution on this issue. And another concern is India's purchase of Russian military equipment, particularly the S-400 the air defense system. Turkey is already imposed sanction by the United States for its purchase of S-400 system. And Washington indicated that if India introduces this system, India might become the target of the sanction. So this issue will remain as a challenge for the US-India security cooperation and also the Quad security cooperation. But overall, I think the Quad has a lot of potentials, particularly on non-traditional security issues such as global health or climate change or supply chain resiliency. And even on the traditional security issues, I think the 4 countries can cooperate more. Some people call Quad as an Asian version of NATO, but I don't think the Quad will become an Asian NATO because NATO's basic nature is collective defense. But I don't think the 4 countries can form a collective defense mechanism. So for example, if there's a armed conflict between Japan and China over the Senkaku Islands, or armed conflict over Taiwan between US and China, I could imagine the Japan, US, and Australia would fight together. But I couldn't imagine that India would be there. So I don't think Quad will become Asian NATO. But as I said, on wide variety of issues, particularly the maritime security, I think this Quad mechanism will continue to be very important. And in terms of Japan-Turkey cooperation, I think Quad plus mechanism can provide good opportunities for the additional cooperation between Japan and Turkey. Already some NATO members showing its interest in joining the Quad Plus and even sending naval assets to this region. And if Turkey and other NATO members are interested, I think Japan would welcome their presence and the operation in the Pacific. The fundamental challenge is China is trying to change the maritime rules, particularly in its near seas. But the maritime rules needs to be universal. And if China changes the rules in East China Sea, South China Sea, then that would have a negative impact on the entire ocean, including the Mediterranean and other waters Turkey faces. So I hope the Turkey could join the Quad Plus mechanism to promote the Japan-Turkey maritime security cooperation. And one last word is, I'd like to remind you that Turkey is part of the United Nations Forces Korea. Turkey joined the Korean War 70 years ago, and Turkey is still the member of the United Nations Forces Korea. And Japan has some bases which can be used by the United Nations Command. And countries like Canada or Australia are using the Japanese bases to impose sanctions vis-a-vis North Korea. North Korea conducts ship-to-ship transfer, illegal transfer at sea, but countries like Canada or Australia are monitoring those activities from Japan. So, so Turkey could do the same if Turkey is interested. So I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
A very intuitive and to the history of the Quad initiative and what role it could play in the coming years. So I'm sure that we will get some questions to that or related to that later on, and then we will address those at the end after all the presentations. But for now, I would like to introduce our first presenter for today. So Mitat ÇELİKPALA is Professor of International Relations, and he's also the Dean of the Faculty of Economics, Administrative and Social Sciences at Kadir University in Istanbul. He has assembled mainly concentrating on Turkish foreign policy, on relations between Turkey and Russia, and on Turkish geopolitics. Maritime for Turkey, which is of course the peninsula, maritime areas and areas of very unique interest, such as the Black Sea or the Eastern Mediterranean. So, Professor ÇELİKPALA, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Dirk. It's my pleasure as well to be part of such a kind and extensive conference and panel. I would like to thank you, TOBB Economy University, Technology University as well. My topic is Turkey's maritime security implications and its maritime security and its implications of its regions and different regions, in fact. Therefore, I would like to try to cover some issues related with Turkey's regions. And just after myself, we will have my colleague Serhat, and Serhat will probably open the issue with a broader perspective on Turkey's maritime understanding of its regions. How can I start? I can say that Christian Berger, in his very informative and comprehensive article, mentions the term maritime security as one of the latest buzzwords of international relations. We have many buzzwords in international relations, and this maritime security is another addition to this literature. What does the buzzword means, especially as far as the maritime security is concerned? It means that the definition of the term varies, and while no internationally agreed definition exists, the term has often been used to describe both existing and new regional and international challenges to the maritime domain. And this maritime domain under current global environment is very important for nation states and all the actors, and they prioritize the issue. And we all know that all those major actors in this maritime policy, there are a couple of issues. Ocean governance and international security have in the past decade, how can I say, started to include maritime security in their mandate or reframe their work in such terms. And we are taking this term very seriously. From this perspective, maritime security is an umbrella term, in fact, to classify issues in the maritime domain that are often related to national security, marine environment, economic development, and of course, human security. And there are many practical issues related with that. We can cluster those issues, practical issues, under the term of maritime security, include threats such as maritime interstate disputes, maritime terrorism, piracy, trafficking of narcotics, people and illicit goods, arms proliferation, illegal fishing, environmental crimes, or maritime accidents and disasters. As you see, there is a list of issues, and those lists are interrelated with each other, and it expands the definition and the content of security understanding or security policies of nation states, as well as the institutions or even private companies. And the argument is then that maritime security should be defined as the absence of these threats. But we already have those threats in our neighborhood. And what else? Maritime security is also mostly concerned with interstate naval conflicts at sea, and from the perspective, the term now includes various zones and jurisdictions, including internal, territorial, and archipelagic waters. It further defines the exclusive sovereign waters of a state called contiguous zone, the exclusive economic zones or EEZs, in which state has a sole exploitation rights of resources like oil and fish. And the latter can be extended by the continental shelf, a natural prolongation of the territory of the respective state. As you see, there's a long list of terms and terminologies related with this maritime security. And in this presentation, I would like to focus on Turkey's maritime issues and their implications towards surrounding regions by taking all those issues into account. But as an IR person, or it's in my role in this group, my analysis will be concentrated on more state-centered issues with a specific emphasis on security and geopolitics, especially the neighboring regions of Turkey. And you know, Turkey as a member of NATO with a special relationship with Russia, and we have maritime borders with Russia as well. This is very important. As a member of NATO with a special relationship with Russia, and despite some problems and issues, a candidate to the EU has become a security provider in its surroundings, sees contributing to the regional as well as global peace and stability as much as possible, and that makes Turkey a kind of an actor, very aggressive and effective in its regions, and that creates, of course, some issues as well as problems for Turkey and its neighbors as well. In addition to that, I have to say that Turkey is the biggest power in the Eastern Mediterranean, who has long-lasting issues with its sea neighbors like Greece, Israel, Syria, Egypt, and Cyprus as well. And Turkey is an energy transit country. There was a couple of questions in the previous session on this energy-related issues, and trying to be a kind of being a hub or energy transit between different regions or consumers and producers, not only by land, but by sea as well. And it's a trading state located at the center of many different alternative routes from north to south, east to west. And there are big issues or projects like road and belt. Therefore, that makes everything are interrelated, and Turkey's maritime security is one of the aspects of this complicated security-related issues. For the sake of being a kind of analytic, I try to differentiate the regions and try to touch the issues and the priorities of Turkey one by one, and just leave them aside as some kind of bullet points, and then related with the questions and comments, we may try to expand the discussion. First of all, Turkey is a kind of a Black Sea country. With the states, it has some historic role in all those regions, and the Black Sea region is the first, most probably, among those Turkey's maritime domains or areas. And Turkey's policy is a kind of a regional ownership policy in the Black Sea, and it has primarily been shaped by Turkey's desire to develop a kind of a regional cooperation scheme involving the Black Sea countries since the early 1990s. The involvement or the participation of all those Black Sea littorals is a priority, as far as the Black Sea is a kind of a closed sea controlled by, in quote, Turkey via straits, and this is an important issue. And in this, at that point, I have to say that Turkey's unique relations with Russia, without alienating in its NATO partners as a old NATO member country in the Black Sea region, was an essential pillar of Turkey's Black Sea policy in 2000s. Try to balance Russia, a newly participate NATO member countries, and the other candidate countries, all those littorals. This has also been one of the main reasons for Ankara's determination to implement the clauses of 1936 Montreux Convention strictly. And this is an important convention for all of us, as the today, even today, we have many discussions in Turkey, and it's in our with our neighbors as well, and our allies also, from time to time, are very critical of this convention. But you know, this convention of 1936 is the concrete result of the interwar political environment and the Turkish-Soviet dialogue in the 1930s. And this is an important convention for Turkey, and most probably for all the Black Sea countries. And the Montreux regulates the transit of warships through the Turkish Straits. You know, Turkish Straits is covering the Istanbul or Bosphorus, the Marmara Sea, and the Çanakkale or Dardanelles Straits. And this is a big package, and it's very important. And the convention guarantees the freedom of passage of civilian vessels in times of peace and war. The convention gives Turkey complete control over the Turkish Straits and ensures the free passage of civilian vessels in peacetime. And this is a kind of a insurance for all those littorals for free passage, and try to control all those external actors from the Black Sea region. And we have some historical experiences in our past, not only for Turkey, this is valid for all those littoral states, especially for Russian Federation. And this is the reason why the convention makes a clear differentiation between the Black Sea littorals, that's Turkey, Bulgaria, Romania, Ukraine, Russia, and Georgia, and non-littorals. And since then, the Montreux Convention has been the essential element of the Black Sea security and as a source of stability for Turkey in peacetime and wartime for decades. And then from Ankara's perspective, the convention is understood as one of Turkey's recent political history's significant achievements, and played an important role in keeping the Black Sea region out of any military confrontation throughout the Cold War era. With an exception, of course, Russian, Ukrainian, and Russian Georgian rivalries within the Black Sea region, the area was a kind of a peace area and tried to exclude all those external powers, especially global actors, to take active role in the region. And this is the reason why Turkey offered some kind of different cooperation schemes within the area. Those schemes served very efficiently and effectively for almost a decade. But after Georgian war, the issue is much more complicated. But still, Russia is a threat for NATO and other actors. Therefore, we have to take it very seriously that this threat must be eliminated. But the participation of all those literals, this is a perspective. I may go into detail with the questions and answers. From this area, the Black Sea and the Straits Convention, I can easily move to another domain for Turkey, which is Aegean issues. And they are old issues, and Turkey's general approach is a little bit complicated here because we have two actors very active in this region, Turkey and Greece. Turkey and Greece being the two littoral states have legitimate rights and interests in the Aegean Sea. And this is a case, there is no question mark on this idea and this reality. And those actors involve their security, economy, and other traditional rights recognized by international law. And there is a kind of a competition, and time parties getting harsh each other. But this is an issue, and it's very important that Turkey's maritime security related issues, especially the sharing all those maritime domains, are the issues for Greece as well. And then the Aegean is a common sea between Turkey and Greece, and the bilateral Turco-Greek relationship in the Aegean has to be based on the following principles. This is a Turkish perspective, of course. The freedoms of the high seas and the airspace above it. And there is a big competition between the parties. How many decades, I don't know, for a long while, which present both coastal states as well as third countries enjoy should not be impaired. And this is a perspective that the parties are seeking for. And any acquisition of new maritime areas should be based on mutual consent and should be fair and equitable. And this affects not only Turkish-Greek relations, but Turkey's relations with the EU and other actors in the region as well. And the fundamental source of tension between Turkey and Greece is the Greek perception to regard the entire Aegean as a Greek sea, in total disregard of Turkey's rights and interests as one of the coastal states, because Greece has many islands in the area, and the discussion around those islands and their maritime areas or jurisdictions are very effectively create some issues between those two parties. From Turkey's perspective, the threat of extending Greek territorial waters beyond their present width of 6 miles. Greek extended, I have to say that her territorial waters from 3 miles to 6 miles in 1936. Turkey followed the suit in 1964. And this is an issue, whether there is a possibility to extend 12 miles or not. And this is a big discussion between Turkey and Greece for the moment. And the remilitarization of the Eastern Aegean Islands, placed under the demilitarized status by virtue of the very agreements ceding from the Greece a 10-mile national airspace over territorial waters of 6 airspace issues. It's a much more complicated issue, and this is the reason why parties are trying to reach out a kind of a resolution of these issues. And they have a kind of bilateral talk between the parties for a long while. They get together more than 60 times, and still we have no end result. And this affects the security of both Greece and Turkey, as well as EU and other NATO member countries for a long while. And it has directly affects all those security-related issues. Let me move the other area related with this Aegean and Turkish Greek and Turkish Cyprus related issues. This is the Eastern Mediterranean, and this is a decade-long issue between Turkey and the parties, and it covers all Turkey's maritime domains as well. And as I said, it is one of the most critical issues that have occupied the agenda of international security and politics last decade. And recent developments in the Eastern Mediterranean such as significant gas findings, disagreements over the demarcation of maritime boundaries, large-scale violence and political instability following the Arab Spring, mass migration via sea routes, and great power dynamics in the region, as well as environmental hazards, make the political entities along the shores of the Eastern Mediterranean part of regional security complex, and creates some kind of a strong incentives for regional coordination on maritime security. And now we see some geopolitical gatherings, excluding Turkey, for example, and this is Turkey's perspective that this kind of an alienation is unacceptable, and we have to take the issue from this perspective. And this tense competition has entered a new phase with some recent developments, newly signed delimitation agreements, for example, or NAVTEX announcements and high-pitched political statements made in the shadow of increasing military exercises in the Eastern Mediterranean are the threats or the threat perceptions of not only Turkey, but all the regional actors as well. And this regional competition rapidly transformed into a more general geopolitical and strategic confrontation in those days, and it's an issue. What Turkey is doing, and some clues or informations, the growing importance of sea-based energy corridor crossing the Black Sea, Aegean and Mediterranean seas through the Turkish streams, along with the Blue Stream gas pipeline, for example, in the Black Sea, as well as Bakü-Tbilisi-Ceyhan, Kirkuk-Yumurtalık, and future Samsun-Ceyhan pipelines, will make Turkey's maritime jurisdiction areas more vital and important than before. And then we have to look at the issue from this perspective as well. Not only in the Black Sea, but also in the Aegean and Mediterranean seas, maritime situational awareness has been developed through different implementations. The Bay of Iskenderun as the terminal area of Bakü-Tbilisi-Ceyhan, for example, and Kirkuk-Yumurtalık pipelines presents itself a special location. And then this is the reason why we are prioritizing the region as well. There are a couple of operations. Let me touch upon those operations and then stop. For example, Operation Mediterranean Shield. And this is a kind of the Turkish Navy operation launched a maritime security operation in the Eastern Mediterranean Sea under the legal framework of United Nations Security Council resolution. There is another operation, Active Endeavour, and Turkish Navy has supported this operation, and statistically, Turkey has provided maximum number of assets for this important maritime security operation of NATO in the Eastern Mediterranean. And this Operation Mediterranean Shield and Operation Active Endeavour are complementary and provide kind of uninterrupted presence operation in the Eastern Mediterranean with mutual coordination and cooperation. And furthermore, there are a couple of UNIFIL maritime operations, which is conducted to police Lebanese maritime areas under auspices, also provides security in the region through active presence. And we see very active Turkish Navy and of course Coast Guard in different regions. And last couple of years, we see joint operations and exercises with the participation of all those assets, not only in the Eastern Mediterranean, but Aegean, Marmara Sea, and the Black Sea as well. Therefore, Turkey, the maritime security related issues are getting higher importance for Turkey, as well as all our neighboring countries in the coming days. But is this enough for Turkey, or what kind of a perspective is developing from Turkey's perspective is, of course, Serhat's issue. And then Dirk, let me stop here. I guess I give some clues and some basic bullet points related with Turkey's neighboring areas in terms of maritime security related issues.
I was about to intervene, so thank you very much. Thank you very much also for a very interesting take and a very interesting presentation of, a very short summary rather, of the issues that Turkey and neighboring countries are facing, which is only going to become more interesting. These are two areas or certain areas that are very important to look at. So let's jump to the next presenter. That would be Professor Serhat on Turkish foreign and security policy, on modern Turkish military history, and particularly on naval history, which is, of course, very relevant for today's subject. And it has also led to the publication of 3 books, among many other things. So today, he will look at the prospects and limitations, potential pivot towards the Pacific region. It's yours.
Thank you, Dr. Siebels. I would like to thank organizers for getting me on board with this very interesting and very unorthodox project, I would say. I'm very grateful because it gave me the opportunity to move beyond the bounds of my orthodox research agenda. The title of my presentation is A Turkish Naval Pivot to Asia Pacific, Prospects and Limitations. Let me explain you where I got the idea first. And also I have to say in the very beginning that my presentation reflects more of an intellectual exercise than a case built on tangible indicators. So this is just an intellectual exercise inspired by the presentation I had. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. No problem.
Okay, so I thought, okay. Anyway, there is this annual International Sea Power Symposium organized by International Security Studies Center at the University of Kiel. And I try to attend every year to that important gathering of maritime security issues, where a maritime security platform. In 2019, one of the key speakers was the German Navy chief, and he outlined the priorities for Bundesmarine, the German Navy. Of course, Baltic, stood at the top of list of priorities for the German Navy, but he spelled out the German interest in conducting maritime security operations in Asia Pacific. And he indeed also went on and argued that the Germany's new F-125 frigates were the right platform to conduct missions in South Pacific, in South China Sea and Asia Pacific. And he said Germany was ready to take on responsibility for maintaining the norm-based international order. So this came as a surprise to me a bit, because I was not ready to hear a German naval chief spelling out Germany's interest in projecting power way beyond Europe or Germany's areas of more interest to Germany in close proximity to the European continent. So with this, having been exposed to this German idea of sending at least warships to contribute to the security, maritime security of the region, got me thinking about a similar Turkish pivot to Asia Pacific. And NATO, as an organization, indeed, for the first time in its history, stated its interest in China at its London summit in 2013. I'm quoting from the NATO statement. I think it was point 6. NATO stated, quote, "We recognize that China's growing influence and international policies present both opportunities and challenges that we need to address together as an alliance." So emphasis here should be on address together as an alliance. In a way, this reflected a consensus of opinion among the allies, and Turkey is a longtime member of NATO. So I had a brief survey of which European navies were operating in Asia Pacific, I came up with a list of usual suspects. Of course, that is in addition to United States, U.S. Navy, Royal Navy, French Navy, the Dutch Navy, were all, operating or have operated or have plans to operate as part of multinational task groups for freedom of navigation operations in Asia Pacific. Now, turning our attention to Turkey, to what extent Turkey follow in the footsteps of those leading NATO nations. Let me begin with a brief outline of the evolutionary trajectory of Turkey's maritime security interests. As my colleague Mitat already elegantly put it in historical perspective, indeed, first, Turkey's first priority for much of the Cold War was the Black Sea, where the Soviets enjoyed a very clear superiority over others. So for Turkey, Black Sea was a principal theater for denial operations. In other words, all Turkish maritime security priority was aimed at denying the Soviets the ability to use the Black Sea to project power across. So this was a military security first approach. In the 1960s, Turkey's maritime security interests kind of shifted onto the West in the Aegean. And again, Mitat already covered all those problems with Greece in the Aegean. And indeed, the problems in the Aegean indeed gave birth to Turkey's first nationally designed and produced warship, Milgem, or national ship. It's a corvette, Ada-class corvettes, and they have scored some export successes recently with sales to Pakistan and Ukraine. Milgem indeed is optimized for operations in the Aegean. Then in the 1990s, Turkey's maritime interests moved south, this time to Eastern Mediterranean in particular. For much of the time, the maritime security was defined in military terms, in terms of military security, in terms of military threats to Turkey. But in 1980, Turkey embarked on liberalizing its economy and pursued greater integration with world economy or with world markets. So in addition to hard security issues, welfare protection, welfare preservation was added to the mission repertoire of the Turkish Navy. Moreover, as it had already been discussed, Turkey was declared a candidate, at least nominally, in 1999, and Turkey now is a member of G20. So all these indicate a growing stake for Turkey in the maintenance of global trade patterns. And at one point, indeed, in the first decade of the new millennium, there was talk of Turkey transforming from a national security state to a trading state. But this process is not complete yet. Whether what we are experiencing today is just a temporary disruption in the process or a reversal of the process completely. But if Turkey eventually becomes a trading state like Japan, probably it's going to define its national interest differently and with a wider global vision. In 1997, Turkish Navy took the initiative and published its strategy document titled Towards the Blue Waters. For the first time, the Republican Navy indeed expressed its interest in world's oceans beyond Turkey's vicinity. This was a very critical turning point for Turkey. And after that strategy document was publicized, indeed, Turkish Navy's operational radius grew consistently. It was a whitewater navy for much of the Cold War, with blue water ambitions in the 1990s. Now Turkish Navy can operate in longer, farther away from home ports, in areas of the world such as the Indian Ocean, around the African continent, And occasionally, I mean, Turkish Navy Turkish Navy vessels made port calls in Japan, for instance, and those port calls in Japan indeed remains to this day the longest journey for a Turkish Navy vessel has ever made, and that was indeed the TCG Turgut Reis, a German Miko 200 class frigate, paid a visit to Japan in 1990 to mark the centennial anniversary of the sinking of Imperial yacht Ertuğrul, and 10 years later, TCG Turgut Reis did the same trip again. As for prospects for Turkey's naval pivot to Asia Pacific, I would like to cover the potential partners for Turkey, in the region, because Turkish Navy cannot operate on its own in such distant waters. And I would like to single out two countries. Japan was already covered by one of the previous speakers to a great extent, but South Korea indeed is a very interesting case and is a very promising potential partner for Turkey to cooperate in the realm of maritime security. It's a peer, it's similarly sized, another middle power, a G20 member like Turkey, and indeed both countries or their peoples have very warm feelings towards each other due to Turkey's involvement in the Korean War in the 1950s. However, there is no sign, no indication of a significant maritime security or naval cooperation between the two countries, except a few very rare high-level visits. However, on other military or defense issues, the two countries cooperated in the previously. The case in point is the development of Turkey's first self-propelled heavy artillery howitzer, which was based on a South Korean design. Also, in designing the Turkey's national main battle tank, I think Turkey relied extensively on the South Korean know-how. Leaving all these aside, it has to be noted that Turkish Navy is keeping a very close eye on what the South Koreans have been developing in the field of naval weapon systems. Another potential partner is Japan. I mean, there are historical relations. There are, again, mutual warm feelings towards each other. Indeed, I already mentioned the visit of Imperial yacht Ertuğrul in 1890 to Japan and the legacy of that disaster. Also, in the late Ottoman era, Japan was envied by the Ottomans for its success against Russia during the 1904-1905 war. Indeed, one prominent Turkish intellectual, Halide Edip Adıvar, went so far as to name his son after Admiral Togo in appreciation of what an Asian nation could succeed against the so-called European nation. Also, I already covered the visits of TCG Turgut Reis. Back then in 1990, it was one of the newest ships of Turkish Navy, and that trip remains the longest distance covered by a Turkish naval ship. And as for their common interest in maintaining the norm-based order, definitely Turkey, as a potential trading state, has a stake in the maintenance of norm-based global order and preservation of the global supply chain. And in that regard, Japan can be considered another peer for Turkey. And this, indeed, all this picture gives us the hope or gives us reason to be optimistic about a potential Turkish pivot to Asia Pacific region. Economically, I already mentioned that, for the preservation of norm-based international order, this such a pivot can be justified. Also, functionally speaking, Turkey will, in a decade, will develop naval vessels, which will help Turkey project power in such long distances. And what I have in mind is the TCG Anadolu. You know, it's a helicopter assault ship, and also Turkey is developing locally an air defense frigate. So Turkey will be able to operate in long distances a national task force. Turkey has already accumulated know-how and experience in multinational maritime security operations. CTF 151 is the case in point. You know, it's a counter-piracy mission. It brings together naval vessels from various nations, from China, India, NATO, sometimes European Union. And Turkey assumed the command of that mission 6 times. Last time Turkey had the command, indeed, it did not contribute the mission with a ship. So this was the extent of Turkey's perceived contribution to that mission. In 2014, Turkish Navy circumnavigated Africa. Indeed, a year later, they repeated the trip, this time in the reverse direction. So this was yet another proof of the range long range of Turkish Navy. And Turkey currently has bases in Somalia and in Libya, and all these require a blue water navy. The final contributing factor to such a pivot will be NATO, of course. If NATO assumes, you know, formally assumes or decides to formally assume a role in Asia Pacific, Turkey will not much of a choice but follow in the footsteps of other NATO members. Turkey has been indeed very much in step with the transformation of Navy in terms of its geographical scope of its operations and its mission repertoire. And very interestingly, despite the good political relations and economic relations with Russia, Turkey contributed to Baltops NATO exercise, sent a warship twice, 2018 and 2019, twice, to North Sea. And the Baltops exercises, we know that bothers Vladimir Putin very much. And also it was reported that he took the issue with former US President Trump and asked NATO to stop exercising or to stop conducting Baltops exercises. Also, in relation to that, Turkey and Turkish Navy have expressed an interest in Arctic operations as well. Therefore, if Turkey continues to its transformation along NATO's transformation, and if NATO decides to move to South Asia Pacific, well, Turkey will probably follow very grudgingly, though. Another case in point is the ballistic missile defense system in NATO. You know, Turkey initially had very strong reservations about NATO's development of a ballistic missile defense system because of its relations with Iran, but eventually it relented. As for limitations, there is a number of them. The political, well, first limitation is, as Mitat already mentioned, Turkish Navy's hands are busy in Turkey's immediate neighborhood, from Black Sea to the Aegean to the Eastern Mediterranean. So it depends on how much spare capacity or capability Turkish Navy will have in the coming decade. So first and foremost, it's an issue of priorities. If Cyprus problem is solved miraculously in the near future, then this will free up a lot of naval resources for Turkey to use to shift to other parts of the world. Whether Turkey will remain a member of the Western Alliance or not is another limitation, because Turkey is sitting on the fence. Well, at least Turkey seems to be sitting on the fence at present. And it seems that it has not renewed its commitment to its Western alliance as yet. So this brings us to the problem of political will, whether there will be a political will in Turkey. The other factor is China's growing economic influence in Turkey. I mean, this week indeed, it was reported in Turkish press that a Turkish public bank secured $400 million loan from China. So, and in times of such financial bottlenecks in Turkey, China and Qatar, figure very prominently. Therefore, it will be very difficult for Ankara to strike a balance between its political commitments, alliance commitments, and its economic interests. As for China, China indeed has been extensively interested in developing military links with Turkey, including naval links. You may all remember that, China did a lot of convincing in the first decade of the new millennium to secure the release of Varyak, the former Ukrainian unfinished aircraft carrier, so that Turkey would let that hulk pass through the straits, Turkish straits, and eventually, arrive in China, to be turned into a casino, floating casino. Then, the Chinese reverse engineered it and built it as their first aircraft carrier. Moreover, this information was shared by one of the previous Turkish Navy chiefs with me. He said 10 years ago, he was invited to attend an annual celebration of the People's Liberation Army's Navy's anniversary, and he gave a long talk there, and he received a very warm welcome. So, an event, I was able to, during an event, I was personally involved, I was able to observe the degree of interest in Turkey militarily and from a naval perspective by the Chinese. In 2014, Turkish Naval Aviation celebrated its centennial anniversary, and I was invited to give a talk there. And also there were foreign representatives around the table, when we had the lunch. Most allied nations were represented by their naval/military attaches in Ankara, whereas the Chinese sent 3 admirals to that meeting. So this was a very high-profile representation, and to me it was an indication of Chinese interest in working with Turkey. As for from a functional perspective, because the countries and their navies I identified as potential partners for Turkey are already the allies of the United States, and they have developed a considerable degree of interoperability with the United States Navy, and Turkey has been a long time ally of the United Nations, a member of United States and NATO member. Interoperability in case a Turkish pivot to Asia Pacific happens should not be a problem. So Turkish Navy should be smoothly, adapting itself to operations in Southeast China with partner navies such as South Korea and Japan. Hence, what stands between such a pivot and what stands in the way to such a pivot is the political will. We have to admit that although formally Turkey has been a member of NATO alliance and has been very much responsive to NATO's transformation, both functional and geographical terms, well, Russia and China have very strong, influential friends in Turkey. So such a mission runs the risk of bringing Turkey at odds with one of its key political partners and one of its emerging or rising economic partners. Therefore, it will be very difficult from a political standpoint to see such a pivot taking place in the foreseeable future, providing that one day Ankara decides to fully recommit itself to the Western allies and takes a very strong anti-Chinese, anti-Russian position. I think I should stop here. Thank you for your attention, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, thank you very much for some very interesting insights and also for some very practical points and an important and vital key thinking exercise. So there are some interesting takeaways from this presentation for sure, and I'm sure we will address some of these in the Q&A afterwards. So we will come to the last speaker for today, which is Kentaro Furuya, who has been working for the Japan Coast Guard for more than 30 years, and he has been both on board and ashore. He has been initially assigned as an associate professor at the Japan Coast Guard Academy in 2012, and in 2015 he started a dual role because he also started teaching at the National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies. So Professor Furuya remained very active at both institutions, which I'm sure is very demanding on his time. And he will speak today about something that he has been personally involved in for a number of years, namely about capacity building for maritime safety and security in the Indo-Pacific region. So I'm looking forward to a very interesting take on this, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Siebels, for your kind introduction. Good afternoon from Tokyo and good morning to participants from Turkey. I'm Captain Kentaro Furuya of Japan Coast Guard. I am an adjunct professor at the National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies and a professor at the Japan Coast Guard Academy. Firstly, I'd like to thank the organizer for having me to this important gathering. Today, I'm going to talk about maritime law enforcement capacity building by the Japan Coast Guard, or the JCG. Due to non-military policy of the Japanese Offshore Development Assistance, or ODA, military assistance had been out of scope of the Japanese ODA. Therefore, JCG has played a primary role in providing maritime safety and security capacity building since 1970, as Professor Matake spoke in his keynote speech and Q&A session. For the last 20 years, JCG capacity building has become more significant ever for Coast Guard organizations in Asia and beyond. JCG has provided maritime security capacity building, including maritime law enforcement. I will highlight why these efforts become more important and then introduce recent initiative of the capacity building efforts by JCG, namely Maritime Safety Security Policy Program and the Mobile Cooperation Team. Firstly, the demands of capacity building in maritime safety and security have expanded substantially due to the economic growth in Asia. The traffic volume increased rapidly, and the expectation to regional Coast Guard agencies in maritime safety expanded. In order to supplement the capability, the need for capacity building concerning the safety of navigation, including the provision of safety information and aids to navigation, maritime search and rescue, and oil spill response expanded drastically. To respond to those demands, in addition to hydrographic survey and navigational safety for Malacca-Singapore Strait that is already in place, JCG expanded the contents of the capacity building to maritime search and rescue and oil spill response in 1982. In relation to Turkey, we have accepted Turkish participants to search and rescue seminar before. Next, in the 1990s to early 2000s, a surge of piracy cases in Asia increased the necessity of maritime security capability to protect international shipping and international trade. Although Japan was not in the region in Southeast Asia, it was not an exception, since the region is a part of the vital sea lanes of communication for Japan. The Japanese government formulated a policy that regional states should own the responsibility to maintain the maritime order by themselves rather than the foreign asset. Instead of deploying the Japanese naval asset to the region, capacity building for regional Coast Guard by JCG became the central pillar to support the region. To begin with, JCG accepted Coast Guard officers in the region to the JCG Academy and launched the Maritime Law Enforcement course as a JICA program. And secondly, the other reason for the increased needs for the capacity building derives from establishing separate Coast Guard agencies in Asia. For example, the Philippine Coast Guard was separated from the Navy in 1998. The Malaysian Maritime Law Enforcement Agency was established in 2005. And then the top priority, those newly established organizations needed to enhance not only their assets, but the capabilities of their officers to become more adept and then professional law enforcement officers to meet requirements to exercise police power at sea. Since those newly established Coast Guard organizations modeled after the JCG could perfectly provide law enforcement capacity building to those Coast Guard agencies. Now I look at the internal policies that support JCG's capacity building activities, meaning in Japanese policy. Firstly, in December 2012, Abe administration formed the proactive contribution to peace policy, in which Japan decided to take a more proactive role in ensuring international peace, stability, and security. This policy was soon reflected in a Japanese ODA charter in 2015. Kishida, then the Minister of Foreign Affairs, highlighted that the new ODA charter aimed to contribute towards international peace, stability, and security as a foundation of development as a part of its proactive contribution to peace based on the principle of international cooperation. Thus, the ODA charter endorsed JCG's capacity building efforts already in place as a part of Japanese ODA policy, which meant that the JCG capacity building became a part of Japanese diplomacy. Secondly, the Prime Minister Abe also articulated the free and open Indo-Pacific FOIP concept at the 6th Tokyo International Conference on African Development, or TICAD 6 in Kenya in 2016. The vision is to connect Africa, which is full of potential for development, and Asia, which is in the middle of economic expansion, so as to pursue the international peace, stability, and prosperity. In order to realize this concept, Japanese government set out the following 3 pillars. 1, promotion and establishment of the rule of law, freedom of navigation, and free trade. 2, the pursuit of economic prosperity through improving connectivity and strengthening economic partnership, including EPA and FTAs and investment treaties. And 3, commitment to peace and stability, including capacity building of maritime law enforcement and HADR cooperation. As is provided in the 3rd pillar, capacity building of maritime law enforcement has become more important for the JCG. In order to materialize a FOIP concept, the safety and security of the Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean is vital to connecting Asia and Africa through the oceans. However, the piracy and armed robbery, smuggling of drugs and other items, illegal migrants, and poaching were examples of common criminal activities in this region, which undermines legal order in the region and hinders connectivity through international shipping. Therefore, enhancing the capability of Coast Guard agencies in maritime law enforcement by JCG to counter those threats became essential for the safety and security in this region. Subsequently, reflecting the significance of the FOIP, the Japanese ODA policy was revised again in 2017 and highlighted the significance of assisting the capacity building of Coast Guard agencies in the region. In sum, there was an external need to develop the capability to meet the requirement of the respective Coast Guard agencies, and then internal need to implement an important Japanese policy. Next, I'd like to turn to my discussions to recently develop JCG's engagement in capacity building, namely the Maritime Safety and Security Policy Program and Mobile Cooperation Team. JCG initiated new capacity building in 2009. Although JCG has already provided practical seminars and exercises, this was the first to provide an academic program for promising officers who, in future, take more responsibility in their organization. To begin with, JCG launched a half-year academic-oriented program concerning the maritime safety and security. Subsequently, this program was revised as a 1-year Asia Junior Officers course in 2011. This course aims to develop junior officers' capability in Coast Guard agencies in Asia by providing the professional knowledge necessary to pursue the Coast Guard operations at sea. In 2013, JCG reviewed the course and found that the Academy could not provide any academic degree, although the participants stayed at the JCG Academy for 1 year. Besides, the review revealed that the area of study was limited to legal theories and practical matters. JCG found that necessary to extend to include international relations and international policy in its syllabus. Therefore, the JCG determined to collaborate with National Graduate Institute for Policy Studies, or GRIPS, and JICA for logistical support. Eventually, the Maritime Safety and Security Policy Program was launched in 2015. Students in the MSP program are promising officers of Coast Guard or maritime authorities in their country and study theoretical subjects including international law, international relations, maritime policy, and security studies at the GRIPS, and other professional subjects including maritime police, maritime safety, and marine environmental protection policy at the JCG Academy. After successful completion of their study, those students will be awarded the degree of Master of Policy. This program is politically valuable, as Prime Minister Abe addressed in his speech at the 73rd session of the United Nations General Assembly. The significance of the MSP program is that students learn and share the principle that the maritime order is a matter of the rule of law and one that is rule-based. By studying international law and international relations, students deepen their understanding concerning the legal framework at sea and how international order and stability are maintained and share their ideas and opinions on this matter. Eventually, the principle of the rule of law, freedom of navigation, and rules-based order, which are Japan's fundamental values, are shared among students. The other initiative, the Mobile Cooperation Team, was established at the JCG headquarters in October 2017. As the demand of capacity building increased substantially, JCG faced numerous challenges. Some were technical and needed experts to deliver seminar and exercise. Some others were cross-sectional content which needed to coordinate. The fundamental problem was that due to lack of dedicated team in JCG, capacity building was fragmented and not consistent in the middle and long term. Thus, the JCG decided to establish a dedicated capacity building team at the JCG headquarters with initially 7 officers. The number of officers increased to 10 in 2019, subsequently to 13 in 2020. This increase reflected greater demands of services and its significance. The MCT mainly provides seminars and exercises relating to practical aspects of duties, including martial arts for arresting criminals, operation of high-speed small boats, search and rescue, diving, boarding inspection, and oil spill response from the surface. The uniqueness of MCT is to create the tailored seminars and exercise for a particular organization. The syllabus of most JCG capacity building program is set out by the JCG itself to achieve particular purposes, such as search and rescue and law enforcement, and accept participants from multiple countries at the same time. This system is preferable option to continue the same program for a long time and share the professional experience and knowledge of participants from different countries. However, it does not address issues unique to the particular organization. So the MCT, to begin with, consult with the subject country regarding the issues and concerns and identify the contents of the capacity building to address the issues. Then experts, including the member of MCT, are dispatched to the country for having seminars and exercise to meet the demands of the recipients. This process further contributed to building confidence. In November 2017, MCT was first dispatched to Manila for exercise concerning high-speed small boat operations for Coast Guard officers from the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Indonesia. The member instructed operations of patrol boats provided by Japanese government as ODA and maneuver of high-speed small boats. During the exercise, Assistant to the Prime Minister, Mr. Sonoura, observed the exercise. In 2018, MCT was further dispatched to 9 countries for 14 times in total. The number of dispatch of the MCT members increased rapidly in 2019. In 2019, members of MCT were dispatched 30 times to 14 different countries. In 2020, unfortunately, MCT applied a different format due to the spreading of the COVID-19. The planned visit to the recipient countries had been canceled entirely. However, given the significance of its service to enhancing the capability of Coast Guard organizations, MCT continues consultations and exchange views on issues and concerns of the countries. Finally, the MCT hosted a number of online seminars. The recipient countries to those online seminars include Indonesia, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Djibouti. Although there is a substantial change in the context to deliver lectures online, in particular high-speed boat operations and the maritime martial arts, they decided to include a lecture on international law and safety management of operations instead. Thus, MCT successfully continued the capacity building of the recipient organizations, even in the difficult or challenging time. To conclude, there are numerous seminars and exercises hosted by JCG. The significance of these efforts is not only providing the capability to recipient Coast Guard agencies in Asia and beyond, but implementing the Japanese significant policy, such as proactive contribution to peace, security, and stability, and free and open in the Pacific. At the same time, these efforts contribute to deepen mutual understanding and build confidence among Coast Guard agencies, which further contribute better collaboration and cooperation necessary to pursue their duties. Further, through these activities, Japanese government can realize its core policy, including the rule of law, rule-based order, and freedom of navigation. I'll stop here and then looking forward to having a great discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much on these very interesting takes, and it's very important to of course have these trainings, have these confidence building measures in place really. So I'm first of all very happy that the Japanese Coast Guard or the Japanese security forces are continuing these trainings, etc. And I have been in personal contact with quite a few people who have attended Japan on one of these courses. So it seems to be having quite a very good effect. So starting with the Q&A session for today, I have 2 questions for our Turkish participants. So first for Professor Güvenç and then one for Professor ÇELİKPALA. So the first one, Professor Güvenç, and you have already touched upon this in your presentation. You've talked about a little bit about a possible engagement, further engagement or a further pivot to Asia. So this may have a damaging impact on relations to Turkey and Turkey, of course. So even though it may be mutual beneficial for Japan and Turkey to have some kind of a security deal in place, would you consider it to be also risky for Turkey? And instead of Quad, for example, what would be the preferable way for bilateral relations between Japan and Turkey? So what's your take from the Turkish perspective on that?
I missed some part of your question, so please forgive me if I got you wrong. While the Quad framework may not be ideal to promote a Turkish-Japanese maritime cooperation because of its composition and probably, I mean, the presence, inclusion of India, for instance. I mean, you know, Turkey have very close relations with Pakistan, and Pakistan and India are very rivals. So it will not be so easy for any Turkish government to sell the idea that Turkey is participating in a multinational framework which includes India but not Pakistan. Therefore, pursuing bilateral cooperation, at least as a way station to a wider institutional framework, might be the way to go. And again, I mean, Japan is a publicly acceptable actor, is considered a peaceful actor, is considered very much like Turkey. And therefore, starting with bilateral cooperation with Japan might kind of facilitate Turkey's involvement in the maritime security affairs of the region. That's all I can say at this point, providing that I didn't miss anything in your question.
No, I think you didn't miss too much, and apologies for some internet issues. I think there was a bit too much construction going on next to our house yesterday, so that might have affected some cable, which was important for the Wi-Fi. So I hope you you will get the second question better. So this one is for Professor ÇELİKPALA. So what's your impact about what's your opinion about the impacts of a new Istanbul channel to maritime security in the Black Sea and to related aspects such as the Montreux Convention or the importance of the Turkish Straits?
Yeah, Dirk, for informing especially Japanese colleagues if they are not aware of this Istanbul Canal project, and this is a kind of a project for the artificial sea level waterway, which is planned by, of course, Turkey to bypass the current Istanbul Strait or Bosphorus, in fact. And the idea is to have a kind of a canal connecting the Black Sea to the Sea of Marmara and thus to the Aegean and the Mediterranean seas. The idea of the project is to minimize shipping traffic in the Istanbul Straits. This is a kind of a project to have a capacity allowing passing through some ships, but it's a very complicated issue. The canal project includes construction of ports, logistics centers, artificial islands to be integrated with the canal itself. It's a much more complicated issue. And the government is expecting some revenue, in fact, to generate around $8 billion revenue per year from this Istanbul Canal. Therefore, this creates a big question mark for many people in Turkey as well. There are a couple of critics questioning this number and said that the net revenue could be negative. And there are other criticisms, include the need to direct resources for focusing on earthquake in Istanbul, especially. We are expecting a huge earthquake readiness and addressing economic issues and potential negative environmental impacts whatsoever. Therefore, this is a big issue for Turkey domestically. And of course, but related with this Montreux Convention, convention, and we have Serhat most probably much capable of commenting on this issue as well. But for Montreux Convention, Montreux is or the Straits is a package, in fact, composed of not only Bosphorus or Istanbul Strait, but Çanakkale or Dardanelles, and as well as Marmara Sea. Therefore, if you are establishing a kind of a canal bypassing Istanbul Strait or Bosphorus, is just one aspect of it. Therefore, it's not. It doesn't affect directly Montreux Convention. It's a part of it, and more than that, through this canal, many are questioning the other regulations related with the passage of Istanbul Strait for many, and we don't know the Russian response. And is it possible to force all those passing ships going through Istanbul Canal? Is another issue. And there is another discussion whether it allows the passage of all those foreign ships, especially warships, via the straits and whatsoever. But this is not part of Montreux Convention, and this is the reason why most probably we have many discussions in those days in Turkey that questioning the Montreux Convention. Even the Speaker of the Parliament said so, but it has created a kind of a harsh criticisms of those politicians as well. Therefore, it's a complicated issue, but I don't think that it's against and removes the Montreux Convention altogether through this channel, but most probably Serhat will maybe add some extra information on this comment as well.
Yes, please. Do you have anything additional?
Well, the question was about its contribution to maritime security, right? The Canal Istanbul, the so-called Canal Istanbul, and its potential contribution to maritime security.
Yeah, and the potential impact on the Montreux Convention and related aspects.
Well, the Canal Istanbul itself will not have much of an impact on the transit regime regulated under the Montreux Convention, because the convention talks about the Straits region, and you have the North Strait, that is the Istanbul Strait or Bosphorus, and you have the Southern Strait, which is the Dardanelles or Çanakkale Strait. Even if a warship or a maritime vessel takes the Canal Istanbul rather than the Strait of Istanbul, it will still have to go through the Dardanelles Strait, and therefore it will be subject to the limitations of the Montreux Convention. So in order to be able to fully bypass the restrictions under the Montreux Convention, another canal has to be built in the south. Then, I mean, the traffic through these two channels will be exempt from the restrictions of the Montreux Convention. As for its contribution to maritime security, again, it depends on how you define maritime security, but it will not contribute, but unfortunately worsen the security situation in the Black Sea, because Montreux restrictions will not be in effect regulating the warship traffic through those channels, while the foreign non-littorals will be able to freely, move their naval vessels in and out of the Black Sea, and that runs the risk of provoking Russia. And Russia does not want to see non-littoral maritime or warships in the Black Sea that much. So this will heighten the tension rather than to diffuse it, I would say. So at least this is the Turkish perspective. So the conventional view here is that Montreux Convention in a way helps keep tension at a reasonable level in the Black Sea by restricting the duration and the tonnage of foreign warships that can be present in the Black Sea anytime. A canal without any restrictions on maritime traffic or transit will probably heighten the tension rather than contribute to the stability of the region.
Thank you very much. Some very interesting takes, and I would agree. I mean, coming back to the original comment about the revenues that this is supposed to bring. I mean, if you compare that with the Suez Canal revenues, for example, that are coming in every year for Egypt, I think that figure as a net revenue is certainly a bit much, considering that there's only a limited number of countries for which this canal would actually be very interesting. So I am very conscious of the time, and I do apologize to our Japanese presenters because we don't have any specific questions today. That is not to say that we do not have anything that is coming out of, because we had one question stroke comment from one of the participants who would like to address the behavior, I would say, between, or the comparison between the behavior of, for example, China and Turkey in their various areas of maritime interest. And of course, this would be something that is very relevant for our forum, because on the one hand, we would have a Turkish perspective comparing that. And on the other hand, we could have Japanese perspectives on the behavior of China, on the actions of China in areas which are of course of great interest to Japan as well. So I would like to take this question and comment, and we can address that in the further group discussions, and we can certainly address that in the upcoming research, which will be one part of the output of this project. So I'm not going to discuss that in greater detail today, but be assured that we will be addressing this in our upcoming group discussions. Otherwise, I would like to refer back to Professor Yalçınkaya for his final words, I think.
Yeah, Dirk, thank you very much. You are so kind. Also echoing the comments from our audiences. I'd like to thank all of them. But if you look from the Ankara side, you cannot find any, let's say, similarity between, let's say, China and the Turkey's behavior in the regions. But, you know, as you say, stated, all thoughts are highly appreciated. This is what we need to do as academic and think about every aspect of them. But I would rather, as an organizer of that event, I have discovered many similarities between Japan and Turkey and in their regions to some extent. So as Serhat Güvenç stated, if Turkey goes back as a merchant state or something like that, cares about not security issues, but the business issues more, I do believe that there will be more similarities between Japan and Turkey. And that's what the academics do. Usually, academics should follow, let's say, not the current agenda or popular agenda, but instead, lots of similarities and the opportunities in future and the prospects for the future. So that's what we need to do. And also, as you state, in our research agenda, there is not only Turkish or Japanese perspective, also there are international perspectives, and you are going to make contribution about that. And one of our Greek colleague is going to make contribution like on this perspective, from the broader perspective, which will make our research more valid. So I do understand some patriotic approaches. This is quite understandable as for audiences, but from our end, we need to be more, let's say, academic without any bias or something like that. Thank you very much for all of you for your great contributions. You know, in Ankara, you made our morning, and it's just like a, let's say, a feast for us. So thank you very much for your for sharing your let's say expertise and wisdom on maritime security issues. Would you like to echo any word or something like that to our audiences? Otherwise, I am going to let's say finish our session. And special thanks to our Associate Professor Bahadır Pehlivan Türk and Japan Embassy in Ankara again. They have made great contributions to make it possible. And special thanks to our assistants to assist all of us. Thank you very much.